All right, welcome to another episode of the Joe and Doug Show. We're back in the new spot with the sofas, and we got some fireplace action going on, and we got Dr. Mike Chichak in the house. Pumped for you guys to be with us. I hope you like the setup. We are talking all things health today. Now, we're not going to self-diagnose anybody. We can't get in any personal information, so if you ask a question about a rash that's on your back or something like that, we're not answering that sort of stuff. But by all means, you can comment on the Youngstown Studio page and ask some questions that you'd like answered. And if we're able to, we'll ask Dr. Mike. And so as always, Joe and I are here, but we have Dr. Mike. He does a whole bunch of really cool stuff. So I'm going to let Dr. Mike introduce himself to our audience, and we'll get into it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. So yeah, my name's Dr. Mike Chichak. I'm a Youngstown native. So I would describe myself as a general practice physician, trained mainly in internal medicine. Right now I practice urgent care medicine, and also really, really avid leadership guy, John Maxwell certified, and I do a weekly devotional style email called Doc Thoughts, which is faith and leadership, and aimed at helping people get unstuck. So it's for people who are looking to make a difference in the kingdom, and so subscribe to that. You know, it's basically you can look up Doc Thoughts on Facebook for that. But from the area, my wife and I, Kelly, have 3 kids, and just passionate about life.
Yeah, you guys are awesome.
Now, in the grocery store, people ask him to pray for them, like in aisle 6.
Yeah.
Do they stop you in the grocery store and ask you to diagnose the rash on their knee?
Oh, it's happened. That's happened.
He gets my text message.
Oh yeah. Well, you get some personal close friends, and you try to go the extra mile for sure.
It's good. Do not stop him in the grocery store.
Please don't.
Do that. You're like, I saw you on the Joe and Doug Show, and can you help me? You know, I have this cough. No. Go get tested.
Yeah.
I think that's where we'll start. You want to start with some COVID stuff? Is that cool?
Sure, yeah.
Let's do it. So I went through COVID. You helped me a little bit with that. A lot of people have gone through COVID. You've helped with that. What have you seen as a physician with the COVID-19? Obviously, it's a real thing. Obviously, some people have suffered greatly under it. I don't want to diminish that.
Yeah.
But there has been all kinds of stuff from wear a mask, don't wear a mask, take zinc, don't take zinc. There's been all kinds of that sort of stuff. How have you seen people fare through it? What are, kind of your recommendations currently for people?
Yeah.
And what are kind of your thoughts on COVID in general?
Gosh, such a great and loaded question.
Yeah.
I can neither confirm nor deny my part in helping you. But no, I mean it's been a crazy year, 2020, absolutely, and we're still lingering in this. Thankfully, it does look like we're going in a better direction. There's been so many things researched as treatments, as preventatives, as hey, can I take this? Is it a wives' tale? Is it is what it is? And then a whole kind of litany of conspiracy theories to go behind some of that. I'll tell you the way that I look at COVID is, for most people, it does tend to be a really minor illness, which is good for most people. It really is. But I've heard it described as playing a really weird game of Russian roulette. Where one person gets a stuffy nose and another person ends up on a ventilator or worse. And it's unfortunate. So I think the precautions are important, especially if you're looking at people who are high risk. If you're over 65 or you have, some chronic medical conditions, it's important. It is important to take those precautions, the mask, the social distancing, those things that we love so much. But yeah, I mean, in terms of medication, there was some data about zinc. It looks like as part of a cocktail of medication, it can be helpful. But I will say, you'd want to run these things by your doctor to make sure that it's a fit for you. But vitamin D is a big one that I'm a pretty big proponent of, especially when it comes to COVID. It's not a cure. You still have to, if you do, and it's some people have had a misconception about it. Well, if I take vitamin D, I won't get COVID. Well, there is some data to suggest you may have a lower chance of getting COVID, but it's not great data. So the real issue is, if you get COVID, being on vitamin D does look to have some protective benefit. So people in this region of the country where there's so much cloud cover and we don't get the sunlight, I say 2,000 to 5,000 international units daily. But again, you'd want to run that by your doc and make sure your blood work is lined up with that.
Or a monthly trip to Florida, right?
Or a monthly trip to Florida would be so
Doc
great.
says Florida.
Go to Florida. Hitchhike in Joe's bag on Gus'
right.
bus and head to Florida.
Absolutely. No, I mean, but it's so true. The sun here is a lot of cloud cover.
Yeah. Is it true you can't OD on D?
It's not true, but it's hard to. Yeah,
Okay.
we have a pretty high level that we
Yeah.
can tolerate. Yeah.
So what about vaccines? There's multiple vaccines out there. My uncle is a VP for Johnson & Johnson.
Oh, no kidding.
You know, a number of folks like the Pfizer one, it's made in Israel, some like Moderna. Is there a better vaccine out there? And do we see the vaccines being effective? Is it worth getting, especially if you're high risk?
Mm-hmm.
And does it mean we're going to go back to life as normal once everybody has the vaccine?
I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, I think the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are pretty comparable. They both have that 94-95% efficacy, which looks at how effective is this thing at really preventing you from getting COVID. The downside is they're 2 doses, so you're looking at from dose 1, you're looking at least 6 weeks from that before you can really consider yourself to have any effective immunity. But they're really good. I mean, and that's the advantage of you said your uncle. Yeah, I mean, that's Johnson & Johnson has an amazing product. It's 1 dose. It's not quite as effective at preventing you from getting COVID, but it's really effective at preventing the severe outcomes. So, I've compared the COVID vaccine to like a flu shot. There's always this confusion out there with patients that they come in with the flu and they say, how the heck did I get the flu? I got the flu shot. Well, vaccines don't necessarily prevent you from getting an illness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ideally they do, but in reality, they don't necessarily prevent you from getting it. But if they prevent you from having severe outcomes, then medically we consider that a win.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing. I mean, we're seeing a lot of the caseload declining right now, which is certainly partly due to vaccine efforts, partly due to some immunity that people have gotten just from getting COVID. There's some variants out there, but hopefully they're not as severe, as some predict. And it does look that there's some crossover immunity from the vaccines that are available.
What about natural immunities? Like I had COVID back in November.
Yeah.
I just had my physical in February, and doc did a series of blood work, and I guess you need like 0.8 something in your blood to be considered to have the.
Yeah.
And I had 6.8, so I'm apparently have lots of antibodies, and I'm good to go. What is that? Because some people are like, I don't need to get the vaccine, I have the antibodies.
Yeah, it's a great question, and there have been a lot of studies looking at it. The trouble is so in a specific case like you, as it stands right now, you would, I mean, there's no guarantees, right? But it would be reasonable to believe that you have a good degree of immunity against COVID. Now, how that natural immunity carries over to the variants,
Sure.
we don't really know that yet. So that's one of the ones that is frustrating. At some point, we'll have better information on that. They haven't been around long enough to really get a good study. The other part of it is how long does that natural immunity last? And most of the studies that I've seen say an average of 6 months or longer. There is a subset of people, maybe 10% of people, that for whatever reason don't get immunity after getting COVID.
Wow.
It's weird. And there's theories why is that maybe they had such a mild case their body didn't have to develop a huge response to it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's all these theories out there. But I think that there is some level, as we look at coming closer to herd immunity, this kind of mystical thing that everybody talks about. Hopefully we can get there. I think we're getting closer. I don't think we're there yet. But yeah, the natural immunity gives you some protection. We don't know about the variants yet. That's the part that's kind of to be determined.
So I really try to build up my immune system going in every flu season, colds, because I just hate being sick. I'm a little bit of a germaphobe, and so with this thing, I sort of did my same stuff, and I follow a lot of things that I've collected. Tried a lot of natural stuff. I don't like pharmaceuticals at all. So the more stuff I can do through nutrition, the better I do. So I'm gonna give you some of my supplements here, and you tell me if it's horseshit. Don't feel free. You can tell me if this is hocus pocus stuff.
Okay.
All right. Echinacea.
There is some data to say that it can boost immunity in a general sense, but specifically, not necessarily. So
oregano.
Similar. Yeah, there's been some data to say it can help with fight viruses, but again, you got to be careful because you can't use it as a treatment, right? If you're on that as a daily thing within the recommended dosage, probably a safe thing for most people, but it's not a guarantee and it's not a treatment for any specific illness.
Well, what I try to do is when I notice people around me start getting sick, I go in a 10-day regimen where I blast it with these extra things just to give me a little extra boost, and then I go off of it and I try not to do it on a regular basis.
Right.
How about garlic?
Garlic, some possible cardiovascular benefits more so. I don't know that I would say a whole lot in terms of getting sick, but it's really not a harmful thing for you either.
All right. What about all the mushrooms like the echinacea, the lion's mane, all of the immune system mushrooms?
Not a lot of good data on those to really survive.
And
it's
Joe's a witch doctor.
I am. I have a cauldron.
Well, we'll pray for you.
Well, even if it locks me in a mode where I'm more aware of staying away from people at that time, maybe that's the whole thing. The garlic keeps people away. I'm cool.
Well, it's been interesting because we've seen less even. Well, for instance, the flu. So that the number that I heard within the past week, and this is absolutely unprecedented, is that locally, and this isn't verified, it's just me talking with another healthcare provider, but locally, 7 cases of the flu so far in this area for this flu season. Yeah, that's it. Now, if there were others, they went undiagnosed, but we recommend if you get sick right now, your doctor's going to tell you go home and self-isolate till your COVID test comes back. So if it ended up being the flu, that flu fizzles out with you, so it doesn't go any further. 7 cases in unprecedented.
So let's pretend that's a real thing, right?
Okay.
That there hasn't been those infections. It's not just people stay away from hospitals and they couldn't get reported.
Yeah.
Now, like when kids come home from school and they all go back to school, and we get these super bugs that go through because we've been away from it. I mean, does it set us up for some bad stuff?
I think probably not. Most of your immune formation is happening really at a younger age when you're looking at the toddlers crawling around, sticking everything in their mouth. I mean, my wife and I tell this story of how one of our kids was on the back deck one day, and there was a bird had, and our son grabs it and eats it before we could get to him. So I don't advise that, by the way. But,
for an immune system, echinacea gone, virgin, I'm in.
So, but they're still doing these things, which it's gross to talk about, but they're doing these things. So there is some of that that's really going to carry over, and your immune system does carry memory with it. So I think that part of it, is isolating and withdrawing from human interaction. I don't think that's going to have some major negative impact on our long-term immunity.
Okay, so it's not like the immune system gets suppressed because we haven't got a lot of exposure, and then when we get a dose of it, okay.
I don't believe so,
my youngest had influenza A and influenza B 3 weeks apart when he was 6 months old, and my doctor still talks about that because, to go back-to-back like that was pretty wild. One of the things that... Go ahead, no, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say... no, you finish, because I'm going to take us on a different track.
That's where I was going to go.
Oh,
see,
dang it.
It's like we're in a relationship.
You just go.
That's great.
The direction we want to go, one of the things we do in our show is we're just trying to help people become the best versions of themselves, to ask the tough questions, take the steps in leadership, be able to do that. And one of the things Joe does is he experiments a lot
Mm-hmm.
with his body. He likes to put himself through heavy fasting. He likes to deprive himself of certain nutrients or increase certain nutrients just to see how his body responds.
Yeah.
And we dialogue through that from time to time when he's a little grumpy because of certain things, or he's really alert because of certain things.
Yeah.
Is there? So we'll start with sleep.
Okay.
And then we'll go into some energy stuff, and we'll go into some fasting, and we'll go into some chemicals. Is that cool?
Cool.
So, recommended amount of sleep for an individual? Is there a certain bed or pillow? Is there weighted blankets? My wife swears by her weighted blanket. What are some thoughts for healthy sleep? If people are struggling to sleep, a lot of people up every couple hours, got to pee, got to whatever. How can we get better sleep? Because that's so important for our bodies.
It's so important, and man, this is really a loaded question. I mean, we could go a million directions with it because there's so many things that really interfere with quality sleep. I mean, even temperature. You know, you have
hot or cold.
Oh my word! Oh, for me,
Yeah,
I want it cold.
Yes,
Cold.
Oh, it's gotta be
Window
cold.
open,
Yeah.
fan
Man,
spinning.
I'm telling you, if my wife was here right now, she'd be laughing. She'd be making fun of me right now. We went through 4 different mattresses before I could finally find one that didn't make me overheat at night.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard. You know, it's really hard. So the basic things. You know, finding the blanket that's comfortable. The weighted blanket. Some people do swear by them. It's a comfort thing, so it would be more a trial and error.
Yep.
Pillows, I'm a fan of the contoured ones that really help support your neck properly. Waking up with musculoskeletal pain in the middle of the night, it throws you off. It really does. You don't get quality sleep. But again, that's one of those things where you've got to find out the one that's best for you. But those ones are good, and again with something cooling built in, so there's even airflow there.
Okay.
Some of the Tempur-Pedic materials can they feel great when you lay down on them, but then they heat up. Just general things that we call sleep hygiene. I'll speak to just a couple things, and I don't want to talk too long on it, but the big one that I would say is caffeine intake. Huge right now in our culture, and I'm a coffee drinker. I think it's amazing, but
you don't drink any coffee, do you?
Never. Don't touch it. It's terrible. So yeah. No, but I mean within moderation. A cup or 2 a day is pretty reasonable. The obvious thing is don't drink it too late. Everybody's a little different. Some people say 3 or 5 p.m., but it's going to keep you up. But you don't always realize it. I have patients come in for this kind of stuff, and they're, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about it. Holy cow, I've been going to Starbucks every day at 5 p.m. And it's like, well, okay, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, but it can be a life impactful thing for that person. The other thing is screens. So I just read a study here very recently that talked about a group of people that did nighttime reading with a physical book and a book light. The old-fashioned, clamp it on the book.
Snake light,
right? Versus doing like a Kindle or something on an iPad or whatever where the screen is backlit. And what they found is that backlit screen actually causes more pupillary constriction, which messes with your melatonin, believe it or not. And then those people that read off of a backlit screen tended to be more sleepy the next day, had a hard time falling asleep that night, and just dealt with more of that grogginess. Versus the traditional book readers, they did the thing, had a better quality night's sleep. So.
Should you charge your devices then outside of the bedroom? Because most people go to bed looking at their phone, playing a game. And
I know, it's so true. Yeah, and I think the longer that you're on it before bedtime, it is going to spill over into your quality of sleep. And what happens is it has really to do with melatonin, what we call circadian rhythms. I don't know if you guys ever hear that terminology before, but that basically, for those who may not know, is essentially the 24-hour biological clock that we all have. It is tied, I will say loosely, to our light versus dark hours. But if you're on that screen and it's right here and it's lit up, that light really does decrease your melatonin secretion. So that can cause difficulty falling asleep. And honestly, I'm so guilty of it. I'm sure you guys are too. And all of us are on our phones right before bedtime. So, use something dimmer. lower the light on
How
your.
about blue light glasses? Are they helpful or no?
Some people find them. I think it can depend on the color of your eyes too. Lighter colored eyes filter light differently. So if you're a blue-eyed person, you may find that can be a little bit of an issue for you. Most people, I don't know if they really notice much of a difference. Yeah, more of a preferential thing, I believe.
Any questions on sleep?
No, I guess, you know, I have sort of like 30 minutes before I go into my routine of I turn the screen off, and usually that's enough to let things, that my eyes stop, you know, jostling like that. I try not to eat after 6 o'clock or drink anything after 6 o'clock.
That's a great one.
That kind of helps.
I'm going to ask it.
Go ahead.
Sleeping naked?
Oh, gosh.
Or sleeping with clothes on?
So I'm not going to ask about your personal habits. Right?
I didn't say me. I'm just saying in general for our audience, Doctor. Joe paid me $50 to ask that question.
Hey, listen.
Make him blush.
Now I know why this is called the victim's care. Well, I mean, I think it really boils down to temperature regulation.
Okay.
That's the biggest part of it. So, and some of it's a couples thing too. You know, you got husband is a hot sleeper, wife is freezing. That'd probably be the more typical scenario. You know, you got to do what works for you.
Now, what about wearing socks on your feet? I saw a TikTok video, and they said that by wearing socks on your feet, it actually cools your body in sleep.
No, makes you be a serial killer. Nobody does that.
I think it's just something fundamentally wrong about it.
I'm with the doc. 2 for 2.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, so let's go some nutrition-based stuff, some fasting, etc.
Well, can I start with keto first?
Yeah,
Because that's okay.
Yep.
So, all right. So my doctor, my family doctor,
Okay.
is fascinated by it, and a lot of doctors hate it.
Yeah.
And even in the same office, they have some warring philosophies of
yeah.
whether or not it's dangerous or not.
Yeah.
And you know, my doctor came from the perspective that he sees a lot of overweight patients. So if you're going to have an issue, he'd prefer you have an issue on the pursuit of not being so heavy.
Yeah.
That there's unhealth that goes along with it.
Yeah,
And so,
totally.
you know, I pushed some limits on what I'm doing. Like
Sure.
I eat almost no sugar whatsoever.
Okay.
I try to eat a lot. I get all of my glucose from fruits if I'm going to get them.
Yeah.
I try not to do a whole lot of carbs at all. Do you think low carb people have are taking some risks?
So that I would say if you're consistent with it, you're getting healthy protein, and you're really watching the saturated fat intake, I think you're probably on the lower end of that risk spectrum. Where people get into trouble is where I'm going to eat nothing but bacon and steak.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah. Hey, I love it too. I do. I mean, it's great stuff, but
Bacon wrap steak. You know,
why not? I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. But it is one of those things that, you know, long term, I think you're really increasing your risk. But it can be one of those things where you may look healthier on the outside, but you know your labs can really be
cholesterol. And
Well, and that's one time we do blood work pretty regularly, and
Yeah.
the one time early on in it, my
Yeah.
cholesterol was super high because of it. I mean, I was eating a lot of saturated fats
Sure.
and stuff
Yeah.
like that. I was going for low inflammation.
Yeah.
But the office called me and said, "We got to get you in here right now. You're going to go through, go to the hospital or something." I'm like, "No, we're under control."
Right, I'm gonna cut the bacon. Thank you. Yes. Here's your sign.
That's great.
Yeah.
So Joe does keto. There's obviously lots of other diets out there. We talked our last show. I think it's something like 2/3 of people struggle with weight loss. I am one of them. What is the best diet out there, right? Because there's tons of fad diets. There's Weight Watchers and Optavia and keto, and you could go down the list.
So many.
You know,
Different flavors of religion.
Right.
So somebody's going to murder you no matter
Exactly.
what you say.
Well, I'll tell you my take on it is you've got to do something that you can stick with consistently for the long run. People get into trouble where, you know, for instance, you're really overweight, you're trying to drop 100 pounds, okay, and you say, I'm going to do keto all the way, right? And you get into it, you're doing great, you drop 50 pounds, and you get so sick of it, you just can't stand it anymore, and then you basically abandon the whole thing, right? So you could apply that kind of concept to any of the diets.
So I did Optavia.
Okay.
I lost 70 pounds.
Yeah.
And I got to a point where I was like, I want pizza.
Yeah.
And then I put about 35, 40 pounds of it back on, but kept 35 off, which is good.
Yeah.
But I just was in that spot where I'm like, I'm if I eat another bar, drink another shake, I'm gonna punch someone.
Yeah, you feel like you just can't take it anymore, and that's the thing. You got to take into consideration that food is a very satiating thing for us. It's something that brings us a lot of comfort. We all want to really enjoy our meals. So when you take that away, you've got to weigh that against your willpower, and how long can you really do this? So you have to make changes that are sustainable, and what I mean by that is something that's enjoyable for you. So there's pros and cons to all of them. Keto or the Mediterranean diet, or even the Atkins and just low carb or low fat or whatever it is.
South Beach.
Yeah, there's so many of them, and I mean I remember back. This is a while back, but there was a grapefruit diet where you're just gonna eat grapefruit, and I'm thinking,
can't be healthy.
How long can you do this? I mean, you're gonna go a week and have nothing but grapefruit. You're gonna have canker sores all over your mouth from citric
Well,
acid.
it took me about 5 months before my body sort of like recalibrated and didn't crave the things like pizza and like I don't desserts. They're not even appealing to me anymore because they're just too much. They're too overwhelming.
You just eat spoonfuls of mayonnaise instead.
No.
So good.
See, taking jabs
you
at it.
don't. You don't.
Hellman's is the best.
Oh, nothing like an ice cream cone with some
mayonnaise.
Yes.
You freeze it, it looks just like vanilla ice cream.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Last time I was at his house, he was like, mayonnaise.
Everything.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it's interesting because my wife and I now, because fasting you can do for a lot of reasons, health reasons, of course, but spiritually too. A lot of people do it for that. My wife and I, we were preparing for a trip that we were going to take, which was really spiritually driven, and we decided to do a sugar fast we started New Year's Day, and we did not have, other than fruit, we didn't have any sugar at all, and we did that for about 4 months. And to your point, Joe, I had completely lost my craving for anything sweet. It was weird. It was almost, you'd see people eating dessert and you just...
Yeah, you're like, that's going to make me sick. I'm not going to go
Well, then I reintroduced it into my diet, which, you could talk about pluses or minuses, but I remember my wife and I were in our kitchen. My sister came over, and she knew, my sister knew we hadn't had sugar in all this time, and we both ate some kind of chocolate, and we took a bite of it, and my wife and I just looked at each other and said, really taste that great.
Right.
It's almost like your taste buds had been down regulated.
Exactly.
And just,
There's a book my wife and I used with our kids called Dr. Denmark Said It. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's...
Not specifically, yeah.
She was a pediatrician for 75 years. She retired at 104 in Atlanta. Wow. She was instrumental in the pertussis vaccine.
Okay.
And so... this book was written by a woman who worked for her for like 50 years or 60 years.
Wow.
And so it was everything she had learned. And it was just, sleep schedule for your baby, rhythms, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And it really was helpful for our kids. Our kids all slept through the night very quickly.
Yeah.
The food schedule was very good for us. But one of the things, I read a blog article about her later. She died at 114. And for her 105th or 106th birthday, the family took her out to eat, and the pastry chef comes out and made her this beautiful, decadent, pastry thing, brought it in front of her, and she's encouraging everybody else to take bites, and he's standing there, like, waiting to watch her take a bite.
Right.
And she says to him, "Young man, I haven't had sugar in 70 years. I don't intend to start now."
Wow.
and I often think of you with that, with the no sugar side of things.
Yeah.
Maybe that was the secret to 114 years. Or
that's incredible.
Some people would say, well, she had 70 unhappy years, not having sugar. But
All right, so let me push the limit on this fasting thing, because I got some theories here, and I want to put it past you.
All right.
You can be a little controversial if you want. If not, whatever.
Yeah.
I have 3 different fasts that I do. I have the intermittent, where I eat in that 6-hour window. That's pretty regularly.
Okay.
About once a week, I'll do like a 24-hour fast, and then once a quarter, I'll do as long as my body will allow me to go.
All right.
And what I'm chasing is autophagy. Like, when I read about this thing, your body, it basically shuts down all the digestive systems and then goes into repair mode and starts recycling some, maybe anomaly cells and stuff like that. And I'm picturing this, and I'm like, that's probably a good thing to give your body a chance to do every once in a while. Because I'm thinking, there's probably cancer cells that if they're just given enough time, they go that route. And if you let autophagy do its thing, that it can clean up after those messes, feelings.
Well, I'm definitely a big proponent of fasting. Intermittent fasting, I would say, medically has a lot of data behind it. There was one study that, now they just looked at women in this particular study, but I think the results are fairly translatable to men or women. But basically, they said, we don't want you to cut calories, don't cut anything out of your diet, eat whatever you want, your normal routine, but only do it within a 10-hour window. Okay, so what you pick the window, whatever it is, maybe 10 p.m. or 10 a.m. to 8 or whatever your window is, right? And they studied these women for I want to say it was 2 months, and they lost an average of about 11 pounds without cutting any calories at all. So I think it is interesting, and I mean, you could think about, that's really not that hard. Maybe if you just stopped eating at 6, like you said, that can actually have a really significant impact on your life. So definitely a big proponent of that. I think, even looking at the word breakfast, break fast, right?
Yeah,
so that's, I think we were kind of designed that way to have, where we're not ending our day with this massive surge of calories
and eating right up until the time your eyes close.
Right, and that's the thing. When you look at a lot of weight trouble comes with insulin metabolism. So every time that we eat, especially if there's a carb load involved in that, whether it's sugar or even bread or some of the simpler carbs, you'll see an insulin spike in your, if you were to measure minute by minute your insulin secretion. That's what happens. You get a surge of insulin, which wants to digest those calories, but what happens is they're stored as fat when they're real quick like that. Right. Your body has to do something with them. So that fasting helps to avoid a lot of those spikes in your insulin. And what we find is, over time, when we have repeated spikes of insulin consistently for years and years, that's one of the big risk factors for type 2 diabetes. So the intermittent fasting helps a lot of that. The longer term fasting is something I think you got to take on a more personal basis, because it's a willpower thing. It's also a health. You have to make sure you're okay to do it, right? Not everybody can do that. I was just having a discussion with a friend actually last weekend about this very topic, and even as far as like a 7-day water fast. And again, this will be something you want to talk to your doctor about. Most people that are healthy at baseline could do it, but most people would need to build up to it. So I would say do a day of like a juice fast or smoothies, but cut out solid food. And then if you can, at the end of that, tag on a 1-day water fast, and you can kind of flip-flop and build on that to see what your tolerance is. I don't know what your record is for how long you've gone.
I probably gone from like Monday to Friday is the longest, but they're typically, I'll go from like a Tuesday to a Thursday, so more like a 72-hour.
And you're doing water only?
Just water and coffee, black coffee.
Yeah. So, and it does have a lot of benefits. It really does. It's the palatability of it. Some people just can't stand it, and we live in a culture filled with food, so your willpower.
I found that like the less sugar that you do, the better you can get through a fast, because you don't have those big dump offs and spikes. You don't feel like crap in the first day. So.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and you still got to function. That's the thing, right? It's not like you're going to take 7 days and just withdraw from your life.
Exactly.
You have to be able to. You've got to do what you've got to do. You've got to do what you've got to do. So you have to realize the irritability, the jitters. Your blood glucose is going to bottom out, and you'll start to get that ketosis will begin to kick in, which is a huge fat burner, right? But it has a self-limiting effect. Is eventually, as more ketones get dumped into your bloodstream, it actually begins to limit how many more ketones are produced. So it has this weird kind of self-limiting effect that you've got to play in that balance, or if you're doing it for weight loss purposes, or otherwise you just go into starvation, you start to break down muscle tissue, and it's kind of.
Well, I had a friend that used to do cancer research, and we had this conversation about the samples that he is playing with. His reactant was glucose, and when we had this long conversation, like, well, what if you don't put the glucose in it? What if you don't give the cells the glucose? It's like, you can't metastasize, and it goes away. I'm thinking glucose feels like an enemy. I know it's necessary for unlocking cells and dumping nutrition and the nutrients and stuff like that. But I know a lot of people with diabetes. And those spikes, they don't have the sensitivities that a healthy person does. Now, messing with this kind of stuff and creating those sensitivities, is there any like health effects like down the road, long term, or can your body, bend that way?
You mean health effects, positive health effects of fasting?
Both. So if a person with diabetes would start to develop the sensitivities, does it make that condition better? And if somebody's messing with it who doesn't have the deal, if they're messing with their sensitivity, could they develop a problem?
You can definitely, I mean, on a case-by-case basis, you can definitely undo some of the type 2 diabetes insulin sensitivity issues by proper diet. Absolutely. And again, I mean, your doctor's got to walk you through that and have your labs monitored and all that. But yeah, there's definite science behind that one. Looking at other things like, does it prevent cancer? Is that where you were going?
I mean, it's a theory. It's something that I'm looking at. I don't know. I mean, I would hate to see someone treat cancer just by not eating sugar, but it's...
Right. And I mean, I couldn't stand behind that one. I can say I have heard anecdotal studies where people have had success from even cancer remission from really extreme dieting, just eating raw vegetable, almost like a Daniel fast. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but, and I haven't seen hard data to really say, hey, you're going to cure, X cancer by this diet, but anecdotally, I've seen some of it. And I think the science behind it looks at just what you're saying, that you're cutting off the fuel source, because honestly, sugar is speaking of glucose specifically, it's a very pro-inflammatory thing,
right.
And it's the most basic fuel source of our body. So, I mean, we always, that's the reason we rely on studies so much in medicine, is because you can do something in a laboratory that looks like it's going to work, but then you apply it to a human being that's so much more complex,
right.
And there's 100 factors that you didn't factor in the test tube, so to speak, and it doesn't work. So, there's that factor. That's always the in vivo versus in vitro argument.
Right. And that's why Doug said that we experiment and you play with this. You don't know that, like, I feel good when I do it. I get good energy when I do it. I get good, but it might be the 20 other steps I took before that. Drinking mostly water and you know what I mean, stuff like that.
Well, I'll share this with you. So I've made a habit in my practice that every time I meet a patient that is either very elderly but in excellent health, and by excellent health I mean they're still mobile, they're walking around unassisted, they're upright in their posture, they're alert and with you, or if I meet somebody who's fairly well along in age but they look much younger than their actual age, I've made a habit of asking those people what their secret is. And I found I will say 2 of them are probably a no-brainer. The one that I get every single time is they exercise in some form or another, whatever it is, walking or whatever form of exercise. Some people it's active gardening. The other one is social engagement. So they're not just sitting at home on their couch, just kind of wasting away. But the third one, which surprised me, and I haven't heard it from all of them, but from probably, I would say at least half to 2/3, is they've eaten oatmeal every day for a very, very long period of time.
Really?
Yeah. And it's funny because
that's what I'm doing.
I do it too. I do it too. I said, well, I don't know. I mean, I know there is some data to say that the oatmeal reduces the amount of time that certain toxins will have contact with your GI tract. So there's been implications that it can have a reductive effect on colon cancer. That being said, if you truly follow colon cancer prevention guidelines, it's the one form of cancer that's fully preventable if you really, really, really go with those guidelines. Okay, so there's that argument, but I think maybe there's something we don't fully know about it, that it has other benefits to help reduce, cholesterol. Certainly, it's got fiber, so a lot of cholesterol issues have to do with fiber intake. So there's that. It's just one of those things, and I say, I can't think of a downside here, so why not put it in your diet?
Eat the oatmeal!
Yeah, oatmeal. Don't dump sugar on top of it, but eat the oatmeal, right? Yeah.
Old people can't be wrong.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. We were talking about this, so there's, I don't know if you've ever seen the blue zones.
Not sure. Yeah.
There are 7 or 8 of them throughout on planet Earth of people that have the most centurions, most people over 100.
Okay, yeah.
And there's actually a book called the Blue Zones or
I've
Blue
heard
Zone
something
Diet.
about this, yeah.
And essentially they
Yeah.
look, and they're all over. There's one in, I think, in Japan. There's one in Italy.
Yeah.
And they interview these people.
Right.
And what did you eat?
What
What
are
did
you
you
doing?
do?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like you're saying, there were certain trends in their diet,
Yeah.
certain trends in
Yeah.
mobility, socialization, all of that led to longevity.
Yeah.
And now, of course, somebody has marketed, packaged it, and is selling it.
It's a moneymaker.
Of course.
Yeah, live forever.
But yeah, the fountain of youth.
Yeah.
So I know that, and you touched on exercise.
Mm-hmm.
So as a general rule for people in their 20s, 30s, 40s,
Yeah.
give us kind of an age range. How much exercise should you have every day? What's
Yeah.
considered a healthy amount? What does it do for your body when you do exercise? What
my
hormones are
gosh,
released?
yeah.
What benefits are there?
Wow, that's oh yeah, such a great question. I would say starting, if you haven't exercised for a long time, a great place to start is a gentle walk, 20 minutes, three times a week, 20 minutes a day, 3 times a week, and then build from there. You see that people make the mistake. I haven't worked out in 10 years, and I'm going to go start a powerlifting routine. I like your enthusiasm, but you're not going to like your back sprain. So, you got to just sort of ease into it. And that's the thing where consistency is so important with it. I mean, the long term, you got to do something that you enjoy. So, when I advise people on exercise, I advise them to find something they really like doing. They can see themselves doing it for years. It can integrate into their lifestyle. Some people it's weightlifting, it could be cardio videos, it could be yoga. I mean, whatever it is, there's a lot of different options out there. But I would say if you can average 30 minutes a day, 5 to 6 days a week, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to work out 5 to 6 days a week, but if you can average that, you work out an hour on Tuesday, but nothing on Wednesday, you're averaging your 30 minutes,
Yeah.
right? So
What's considered a workout? Does the heart rate? Do I have to cover my shirt and sweat? Like, what do you consider a
I mean,
workout?
your heart rate should be elevated. Again, this will be a convo with your doctor just to make sure you're in a safe zone. But your heart rate should be elevated. You should at least have some mild perspiration going on. But your heart rate shouldn't be so high that you cannot talk. You should be able to have some degree of conversation. If you're looking at getting into an anaerobic zone, it's going to be tough for you to talk, but you should still be able to have some ability to carry on. If you're huffing and puffing that much where you can't,
Slow down.
you've exceeded that heart rate. You got to back it down a little bit.
I got a question for you. Since
Yeah.
we got a doctor here, I've been wondering this because this is something I've been fighting. I love running 5Ks.
Oh, all right, great.
And
Yeah.
I used to be able to just snap them off, no problem.
Yeah.
As I'm getting older, my heart rate will go up and it'll
Yeah.
stay up, and I have to slow way down to get
Yeah.
it down, and I
Yeah.
can't stop it. I can't stop it with breathing. I can't stop it with anything. I don't know how to combat it. What do I do?
He's got a pill for you.
Sweet.
I'm just kidding.
That's right here in my bed. Yeah, no, I mean that is a tough one. Part of that is age related, but part of it has to do with how you could be trained. There's some strategies you can do with intermittent, almost like intervals, basically. So that's one thing. If you shoot the heart rate up, and then you go back down to a pretty easy type of exercise, what we hope to see is that overall you begin to hit that quicker recovery. I mean, you're a guy who stays pretty fit in general. Fasting can mess with that a little bit.
Really?
Yeah, well, because you got to remember that your body's depending on glucose for that. So if you don't have much of that, and I'm not saying go eat sugar,
Sure.
don't misunderstand me, but some carbohydrates that your body can convert to that glucose, that may help a little bit. If you're really in a ketogenic state most of the time, it is going to be a little harder for that heart rate to recover quickly. So that could be part of it for you. I think a lot of it is really based on the type of training that you're doing. So I'm a pretty big fan of interval type of cardio workouts. They get that heart rate up, but they train your body to come down quickly with that. But you're not stopping either. So hopefully that answers your question.
A couple of the cycles in, the
Yeah.
first time it maybe takes me a couple minutes.
What's a normal heart rate for you, and what do you try and bring it down to? What's
Man, it's up there. My watch starts telling me that it's getting close, and I'm breathing heavy because I
Yeah.
can't get any
Yeah,
oxygen.
Yeah.
And then I'll slow down for maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and then I can bust into it again,
Right,
and maybe get
right.
another half mile out of it, and then
Yeah.
I'm right back there. And it shortens every time, so it's
Oh,
getting
yeah.
better.
Yeah.
But then the next time I run, it's the same thing.
Yeah, and the warm-up period's important too. If you're starting from a resting state and you're just going kind of full on into it, you'll feel like you have the ability to go longer because your heart rate is trying to catch up that whole time. But if you warm up properly, you'll find that you hit your max heart rate more quickly. But it's still that recovery period. I mean, honestly, part of it's age. I mean, it is what it is, you know. Right. But I will say the other part of it, weight training can help with it too. What we see with weight training is it's gonna, as a guy, it's gonna increase your testosterone levels. So you're gonna build endurance through that as well, and having more lean muscle mass will help with that. You know, just a few tips.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
So we're coming pretty close to the end of the show here. So I'd like to do just a couple of just quick health hacks anybody can do.
Oh, you know, we build this out. We're going to talk about the brain chemicals. We got to do a couple of those.
Okay, you want to do brain
before
chemicals
that, yeah.
before the hacks? All right,
yes.
All right. Brain chemicals.
All right. So we'll do the being able to invoke the natural brain chemicals, where cortisols and the endorphins and serotonin and adrenaline, being able to like keep a couple of them out of your life as the villains and having and embracing more of them. What can people do to keep healthy use of those chemicals?
Because you have so much depression, anxiety, and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And a lot of that's related to brain chemicals, and so then people go on medications, which sometimes are very helpful from their doctors and stuff like that. But other times, sometimes those can be medicated when they could probably be helped with some exercise or some sort of routine.
Yeah, and I think some of it comes back to the basics. The exercise is a big part of it. You know, we do see increase in serotonin levels with exercise. We see a decrease in depression, which is kind of, it's ironic because in depression, one of the biggest things you deal with is a lack of motivation. I mean, you just don't want to do it.
Yeah, and it spirals.
And it just keeps going down. Yeah. So the reality is at some point you got to pick yourself up off the couch and just have to start. I mean, you just have to. And then it becomes a vicious cycle in a good way, where you begin to see the results, you begin to feel better, you begin to become more engaged in it as that serotonin level increases. I think melatonin's another one. We touched on that a little bit earlier. Good sleep cycles are so important for so many reasons. Even for serotonin, it's just massive. You can't ignore that. So if you're leaning on the coffee and you're getting 3-4 hours a night of sleep, you can do that for a short season. It's going to catch up with you. Beyond that, cortisol is another one. Now that one, it varies quite a bit. We see a couple peaks throughout the day. Typically, like your 8 a.m., you're going to have a peak of cortisol. That's what naturally wakes you up in the morning, helps to really kind of, get that wakeful state going on. But I think that one's probably, you have to get more in line with your natural sleep and wake cycles. It's tough to really alter that one, unless you're talking about some kind of deficiency state, and that's a whole other conversation. But it's sleep wake cycles. It's really respecting the way that we're designed. That 6 to 8 hour sleep. It's important. It's important all throughout life.
Does hydration affect the brain chemicals like that? If you're dehydrated, are you going to have higher cortisol levels or lower serotonin levels? Those things, does that help?
Yeah, it's going to in a general sense. I'm a big proponent of staying well hydrated. I think it's something that it's easy to overlook, especially in adult life. You get busy and you're always thinking about other people. So it's easy to forget, get your Pellegrino and take it.
That's right.
So,
it's the Joe special.
It's so good. I love that stuff. Yeah. No, but it is important. I think one of the things that you'll see with proper hydration is even some of your aches and pains can start to disappear. You develop a little higher basal tone of a lot of muscles in your body. Even a lot of people hold tension in their neck. And you'll see there's just a slight increase in that contraction of that muscle because it's not as well hydrated. So you're going to see some improvements in some general aches and pains just by, staying hydrated. It does help to flush out the lactic acid that builds up and things. I mean, if you go for a massage where they tell you make sure you drink extra water, this is the kind of thing we're talking about.
Sure.
But yeah, that's what I would say.
How important? One of the things we talk about a lot is mentality, attitude, emotion, choosing those things, realizing we're not ruled by them.
For sure.
But we have a choice in the matter.
Yeah.
How much does that affect physical health? Like when I wake
gosh,
up
yeah.
positive
Yeah.
and choose to be positive rather than negative, even though I'm facing the same circumstance,
Right.
two people can have. How does that affect chemicals? How does that actually affect a person?
Well, yeah, I think the serotonin is probably what you're looking at there. It is absolutely massive. I mean, we all are faced with difficult circumstances, right? No question about that. But the choice is always ours. You know, I heard somebody describe these negative thoughts as almost there's just a bunch of tennis balls floating there, and you could pick it up and you could look at. My life is terrible. You know, it's awful. I mean, come on, we've all been there, right? Or you could just kind of bat it away and say I'm done with it. But yeah, what you'll see is when you make that choice more quickly to, you know, focus on the positive things, you're going to see that your motivation starts to pick up, and then a lot of those hormonal levels will follow suit with that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, how do you have some people who are sedentary, eat all the wrong stuff, and the body still figures out how to make them live another
It's
day?
amazing.
It's crazy.
I mean, we have an amazing God. That's what I would say. How you make muscle out of Ritz crackers? I'm not
The line
sure.
of the day.
I'm not sure. But
I'm telling
works,
you,
yeah.
you feed a pig an apple and it gives you bacon.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
It's a miracle. It really is. Yeah. No, I mean, it's true. I think genetics do play a role in it. Yeah, it is.
Well, because you see people, we've had this conversation, you know, you see people that are fitness trainers, super healthy, have a heart attack at 43, something crazy like that, and then, you know, you watch other people light one cigarette up at the end of another
and drink vodka and they're 120.
Right.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like,
I know.
Not that you want to make a principle out of that by any means, but you look at that stuff and you're like, well...
We found some, and I don't want to take too much time, but we found some research to say there's certain enzymes that are present in people's lung tissue that is genetically programmed. And if you have higher rates of it, the cigarette smoke has less effect because you break it down faster. The trouble is, you don't really know where you fall in that spectrum. We don't have a great way to test for that. And the one test that we do have is if you smoke and you get lung cancer, you're probably on the wrong side of that spectrum. So
the roulette game continues.
It's a roulette game. It is. So I do not advise smoking for anyone.
I mean, my grandfather is 90.
Yeah.
He had a bout with COVID, and you know, he was weak. He had to get some fluids and stuff like that, but it was mild for his age.
Yeah.
You know, he eats hot dogs, drinks diet soda, really does not eat great.
Oh, yeah.
But is in fine shape. He's all there mentally and stuff like that. And you look at that and you're like, all right, like I got, you know, is it just genetics in that sense? And how much, I'll go slightly spiritual and then we'll get into the life hacks. You know, how much is it our days have been numbered before one of them has come to pass?
Wow.
That sort of spiritual mentality that at the end of the day, you know, my dad died at 60. Now, he died because of renal failure, because of diabetes. However, had he not had all that and taken care of him, would he still have died at 60 in a car accident? Like, if his days are truly numbered, and we believe that, you know what I mean? You kind of look at those things. You know, my father-in-law was 57. Like, you know, you look at those same things, and there were certain contributing factors to that. But at the end of the day, if his card was up, and it was going to be up regardless. Now, I know that seems a little fatalistic in terms of we just talked about all these great things we can do to benefit our health.
No, I mean,
down, man.
Yeah. You know, the argument I would say though is and listen, it's
quality.
for God to decide, right? But it's quality. I mean, I do think that we're supposed to take the best care of of our body that we can. None of us are going to be perfect at it, no matter what we do. But I think we have to be intentional about it.
It's good.
I know, you know, my wife's father passed away. And I mean, I think he could have been here a lot longer. It was this picture of irony. My mother-in-law, his wife, is this world-renowned dietitian. I mean, PhD. She was the director of medical dietetics at Ohio State.
Oh, wow.
Amazing person. You know, and she was married to this guy who all he wanted to eat was Reese bars and tasty cakes.
Wow.
And they would just go around the house arguing with each other. And unfortunately, you know, it caught up with them. It caught up with them, and now, you know, she's in a different place now. It's a great thing, but then you think, what could have happened, right? Even if hypothetically there was a car accident that same day and he was gone, the relationships with his kids would have been totally different, and all these other things, the downstream effects. So,
absolutely true. I think of my dad wasn't able to play with my kids the way he would have had he not been had those health issues and stuff. So totally get that. The quality is definitely important.
Yeah. But it comes down to motivation. You know what I mean? It really does. The Reese it's always going to taste better than a carrot.
Especially it's Easter time. Those Reese's eggs are the perfect ratio of peanut butter to chocolate.
You're going to start preaching now, aren't you?
I am. It's wonderful. We actually used those on s'mores the other night with the kids.
Oh yeah,
the kids were inhaling them. It was awesome.
Yeah, Joe's he's silent right now.
Yeah, I know. Joe's wants to stab me. So as we finish the show, a couple of what's 3 things or 5 things anybody watching the show, something simple they could do every day. That if I want to be a little bit healthier, I get up in the morning, I do this, I make sure I sleep this. Like what 3 or 4 things everybody can kind of do? What would be your, hey, I want to be a little healthier. What can I do?
I would say number 1, exercise. Absolutely. I mean, it's gonna be a pain when you start doing it. I mean, you got to tell yourself that you're not going to want to do it. You got to force yourself. The first few weeks will not be fun. It will change your life. The second one would be really be intentional about your diet. I think that's a big deal. And if you don't know where to start, I would say lean protein should be one piece of that plate. A clean, lean vegetable, like a steamed broccoli or a steamed vegetable where you're not saturating in cheese or butter. That would be the second part of that plate. The third would be some type of whole grain carb, like an oatmeal or even a whole grain pasta, whole grain bread. May not be the best, but it's better than your simple carbs. And then you got to get your fruits in there too. But being intentional about that. I mean, really, wherever you go, you should be ordering off that healthier part of the menu. And on a I would say, to throw a third thing in there, I think really taking advantage of opportunities for personal growth would be the third thing that I would say. That would encompass your faith and just really investing in yourself. We don't know where we could be if we miss out on the opportunities that are in front of us. So,
that's good.
And every day we have one of those opportunities.
Awesome.
Sweet. Love
this
having
was
you on.
a great show. Thank you, Dr. Mike. Check him out on Doc Thoughts. You can follow him on Facebook. And if you want to go to his practice, where do you practice right now?
So I practice at it's Hometown Urgent Care. Formerly, we just got bought out, which it's now Well Now Urgent Care. So I'll give them a plug there. It's a great place to come for your health needs. But yeah, they're all over the place now. New York, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. It's a pretty good sized company. Awesome. So yeah.
Well, Dr. Mike, thanks for joining us. Yeah. Thanks for watching, guys, and we will see you on Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. If you like our programming, we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our Facebook page, or subscribe to your favorite podcast platform like iTunes or Spotify. This is original Youngstown content, and we would appreciate you sharing the videos and the word about us. Thank you.